right, I think we're ready to go. Let's pull the microphone a little closer so you guys can hear every dulcet tone. Which reminds me, I also need to fiddle around a bit with the settings. Because as I recall, oop, that's a bit much. As I recall, that might be about right. Testing, testing. Yep, that's right. I had to change around the USB settings on here to make all this work. But they're changed, and that's good to go. So we're going to chug along with the various elements tonight. We'll see where it goes. Should be a fun night tonight. Couple little things. Nothing really huge tonight, I don't think. But we'll see what people think. So let's just jump right into it. I need a news. Do I have a... no, I don't. I should have an OP for the news. I keep forgetting to do the main OP as well. That's unfortunate. but let's go ahead and switch into the news. Get ready for that. Because everyone likes the news, right? It's news time. Come on, we'll do the news. Okay. Welcome back to the latest anime news for the week ending May 4th, 2018. May the 4th be with you. I personally love starting the show with new anime announcements, and we have several. In fact, that's all we have. Let's get started with Shirobako. This show was a godsend to those of us interested in how anime actually gets made, but it really felt like lightning in a bottle. 26 episodes of anime set at an anime studio showing how anime gets made. Well, at a recent event in Tokyo, staff revealed that they've begun work on a new Shirobako anime film. It'll involve the same director, animation studio, script writer, character designer, and other staff. There's no release date yet, but they have confirmed that this will be an all-new work, not a clip show. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Also awesome. Oops. Oh. Digimon. The official Twitter account for the Digimon Try movies tweeted an image of Agumon, right over there, along with the text, "The adventure evolves again, a new project starts." Sadly, that's all we know, and it begs the question, does this mean a new Digimon adventure project, or a new Digimon the franchise project? Who knows? We will have to wait and see. Finally, we won't have to wait for more details about the upcoming Yu Yu Hakusho anime project. Celebrating the 25th anniversary of the series release, this new OVA will adapt 2 previously unanimated chapters from the manga. One's called Two Shot, and the other's called All in One. Kind of confusing. The first, Two Shot, reveals how Kurama and Hiei met, while the second one, All in One, features the heroes reassembling to deal with a hostage situation in the spirit world, apparently. The original series director and storyboarder will return, as will the original voice actors. Yeah, this OVA will be included in the 4th part of the 20th anniversary Japanese box set, which will release on October 26th. So if you're a big Yu Yu Hakusho fan, snap it up quick. Alright, that's the news. That was easy. Not a lot of news this week, which is good. Because, you know, actually, I'll just do it that way. Sometimes it's nice to not have to explain a whole bunch of stuff. It's just, these things are coming, and that's all there is. Oh, I need to print something out. So, that's weird. Oh, and I forgot to do the lower YouTube chat. Oh well, that just won't. We just won't have that on the lower third for now. That's fine. So give me 30 seconds to print something out here. Just need to run over here and do that. But hello, everyone. I love a parade. I should do something anime, right? Let's see here. The first word of my dream I can clearly see. Planet Eden, high beyond the sky. Beautiful and sad is this story I'll tell of the winged traveler, eager. Neither a smile nor a sigh he gave when he left. I left, feeling my spleen decline, and hoping one day we'd fly over. That's a tough note to hit. Back to those places we once shared. little bit of anime for you there. Okay. Let's move on. Hey, Tonto. Good to see you tonight. I'm going to move on to the review. Like I said, I might be sort of firing through a bunch of stuff today. Just because I kind of, I feel like that's going to be the appropriate thing to do for the topics tonight. Just not a lot of detail to a lot of them. All right, let's see how this goes. Hey, Spinderwin. There's an elephant in the room, but I can't talk about that yet. Let's table that while I talk about the manga Bunny Drop in a spoiler-free way. This is a 10-volume shoujo manga, and the basic premise is that it focuses on a 30-year-old man named Daikichi who goes to the funeral of his grandfather, only to discover that there's a little girl there who was apparently his grandfather's love child, and no one wants to take her in. No one wants to do anything with this little girl. She's very quiet, very closed down, and he feels really sorry for her. As he sees other members of his family reject her, essentially, not to her face, but refuse to have anything to do with her, he gets increasingly incensed, to the point where he finally announces that he's going to take her in and care for her. So he ends up kind of adopting this little girl named Rin. Although, to be clear and to be fair, or to be clear and to be fair, he doesn't adopt her in the official legal sense. He's her guardian, and he makes that very clear. The art in this is blissfully simple. About half the panels actually have backgrounds, which allows you to focus on the characters and their emotions. It doesn't overwhelm you with details and try to really, get really, strongly grounded in a particular locality, which I think is appropriate for this kind of story. It's fundamentally about a man coming to grips with the idea of being responsible for somebody else, and a little girl starting to become socialized, if you will, starting to become a more normal, person. I should also point out, this may sound like a weird concept for a story. It is very much atypical. It's probably a little bit more josei than shoujo. It's clearly aimed at a more adult audience, but there is no fan service and no sexualization whatsoever. Even in cases where the author could have put those in, it's just not there whatsoever. There are some visual tropes in terms of, crazy expressions, things like that are common to manga. And they might be a little hard for a complete newbie to manga to decipher, but they fit well. It's the sort of thing where I'm glad that those expressions and tropes were used in this case. They weren't just used only to be funny. I should point out, to that point, there's this thing where characters, and especially in a comedy, and this is partly a comedy, sort of a slice of life kind of a story, where Daikichi, the adult, has these kind of over-the-top reactions to things. Somebody will say something that seems a little weird, and he'll have that shocked expression, and he'll say something, really angry. I'm not sure how much of that we're meant to believe he is actually saying. The characters around him don't seem to be reacting to it in a very strong way. It appears to be kind of a manga thing, so just be aware of that. It does an amazing, amazing job of showing the emotional life of a young child. You really start to care for Rin. And even if you're not into kids, even if you don't, even if you find kids annoying, right? This manga does an amazing job of getting past that. You care for this girl, and not in a cheap way. It's not because somebody puts a gun to her head or anything. You understand where she's coming from, and you also understand the limitations she's working with. That she doesn't have a fully formed adult understanding of the world and how people interact, and so she's doing her best to respond to other people in a way that kind of won't get her into trouble, basically, right? A lot of the first couple of volumes are all about her kind of opening up after being in this environment that was very weird. And there's no indication that people were really harsh on her, really hard on her, but she was living with this old guy and his maid, and it's very hard for a young child to understand how those people should be behaved with, if that makes sense. That said, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say, about 30% into the story, it jumps forward to 10 years later when Rin is in high school. And the rest of the story is Rin in high school, basically. So it transitions from this story about a guy taking care of a little girl into basically a high school, not quite romance, but a sort of high school dramedy, right? Where there's a bit of drama, there's a lot of comedy. It's more of kind of a school life story, but more grounded in real world. There are no aliens or anything like that. And now we get to the elephant in the room. So spoilers, I'm going to put a little thing right here. Spoilers. Because I have to address this thing that a lot of people address about the manga. As Rin grows up, she starts taking over the domestic duties of the house voluntarily. Like there's a line in there where he says that when she hits like middle school, she's like, I don't want you, doing my laundry. I don't want you, doing the cooking because you're bad at it. Let me just take care of that. And she actually does a lot of the cooking when she's younger. So she's doing a lot of those domestic duties at her own insistence. In high school, there's a boy, as there so often is, and Rin just doesn't really care for him. Like she grew up with him. Like they know each other very well, but she doesn't have any romantic interest in him. She's just a guy. And people start asking her about, are you going out with him? Are you going out with somebody else? And she gets flustered. And she starts thinking to herself, is there a boy I like? And she comes to this realization that the only male character that she has any sort of emotional connection with is Daikichi, right? And it should be pointed out that Daikichi and her relationship has remained, while clearly parental in structure. Like, she understands he's not her dad, biologically, but he has this, father relationship with her. And he sees himself as fundamentally her guardian, and that if her mother wants her back, then he is prepared, at least intellectually, to let her go. It's not his job to control her life in the future. And so she starts to realize that she really likes the situation that she's in. She really likes living with Daikichi, doing the cooking, all that kind of stuff. And she realizes she doesn't really want to move out. She wants to stay with Daikichi, and kind of take care of him. At this point, Daikichi's about 40, and he works a blue-collar, physical labor-intensive job, so he's starting to get a little bit worn out physically. A lot of aches and pains, right? So Rin can see that he's starting to pay, right, for that. And he spent 10 years of his life taking care of her. She wants to take care of him now. And so she explains that to Daikichi. And the manga is very clear to say that, like, somebody asks her, so are you in love with Daikichi? And she goes, I'm not in love with anybody, in the sense that I've never been in love with a boy or a girl. But when I think about Daikichi, I have these strong emotional connection feelings for him. So she explains this to Daikichi, and he's very put off by this. And they talk it out. And to be clear, there is no sense of any physical or, far be it, sexual attraction on either side there. They really like each other. Like, and, they have a very healthy father-daughter relationship. She doesn't always agree with everything he says, but there's this strong bond there. She basically just wants to live with and take care of Daikichi from now on. And in addition to a career or whatever. She's not saying, I don't want a career. In fact, there's a segment in the manga where she's like, oh, now I know what I want to do as a career. But they're dealing with this awkwardness. So Daikichi lays down a couple of restrictions on this. He says, A, we are not to do anything about this until you're 18 years old. And B, I will always see you as my daughter. So, make no mistake about that. There will always be this relationship between the two of us. And then we move forward several years, and they decide to live together as husband and wife. Now, again, there's no sense of anything physical happening between them. They're just living together in this marital, they're living together in a situation in which they are both taking on the traditional role of husband and wife, right? But it's not because of, they want to, it's that those, they've been doing those things for each other anyway. And she expresses a desire to take that further. That, like, she wants to, at some point, like, have his babies. Now, he is very non-committal to this. He's very non-committal to this whole idea of them being sort of this marital unit, right? He seems to see this as basically humoring a daughter who doesn't want to move out. He's basically saying, look, whatever, if you want to just stay here at home, that's fine, but, like, understand you're always going to be my daughter, right? That's not going to change. You never see them getting married, none of that, although there are some implications that maybe, they may have, there are some, at one point, like, he refers to her as his wife, but it's not sure if he's using that in a sort of a joking sense. I don't know. So here's the thing. I expected this to really creep me the F out. But it didn't creep me out as much as I expected. Partly because the author establishes how this relationship is changing over time. And, he is not seeking this relationship. And she's seeking a relationship, in a sense, out of innocence. It's kind of like a little girl saying, I want to be your wife. She doesn't really think through the practical implications of that, and there's no indication that the practical implications of that are ever going to be realized, right? The ending does feel weird, and it feels like a wrong turn in terms of, like, I certainly would not have made that plot decision, but I loved everything up to that point. I was a bit disappointed that we kind of jumped from, like, 5-year-old or 6-year-old Rin to, like, 16-year-old Rin, and we didn't get to see any of the, character development throughout that time. But I was there for that emotional journey. I felt that ending was just a weird place to take it. And again, I should point out, there is no fan service, no physical attraction of any kind. The fact that the author was very clearly not trying to deal with this. Oh, and I should also point out, this is also very, very important. Understand, because unfortunately, half of you are probably turned off by this point. It is revealed later on that they are not related at all. That there's no blood relation whatsoever. That basically the grandfather's maid got pregnant and had nowhere else to go, and so the grandfather agreed to let her stay there, and let the daughter stay there with him. But there's no blood relation between them in any way, shape, or form. And, like, Daikichi knows that starting when she's like 6 years old. So that is a very, it is not that. And that's an important thing too, that they kind of build up to, that the fact that they have these feelings for each other, and there is still certainly this, again, parental structure. But so overall, again, to be clear, I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was a very well told story about a girl growing up in this context. The ending is just a head scratcher, and I just don't really understand why the author went in that direction, but I don't think it spoils the story. I think you can read it and say, I really would not have done that, but I'm glad I experienced that, that view of these two characters as they, as they progress. So I hope you found this useful. If you go and check out the manga of Bunny Drop, there was an anime adaptation. It only adapts the first couple of volumes of the manga, so I believe it does not involve any of the high school time skip. So just be aware of that, and that is out there and available. So again, I read it, I enjoyed it. It just really. Waiting for chat to catch up. I'm gonna grab some water. And that's the thing, Spin to Win, is, as he says, you're still my daughter. Like, I am, and there's no indication that he's actually going to take her up on that offer to have his baby, right? Like, no. So there's the sense that she's like, someday I want us to do this. And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever, honey. Like, no. But it's very unclear. And he's very laid back about the whole thing. And so that's the other complex thing. And the fact that there's, it's not trying to be sexy with it, so it's weird. I don't know, Brendan. What about the new Furry Curry? Yeah, and that's the thing Spin to Win is it's entirely about the tone. Like when I went into the manga, or I went in, I read the first couple of volumes of the manga, and then heard about the ending, and then finished the manga, and I figured I would just be really creeped out, but it didn't do that. It just didn't move in that direction. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Fisher. In the manga too, the single mom is not quite set up, but established. In fact, even more interestingly, in the manga, they set up this thing where the two of them kind of want to get together with each other, but they won't because their kids are fighting, and they don't want their kids to have this awkward relationship as siblings, so they kind of agree to not date. And the author establishes that this is kind of one of those, it kind of should have been, where if only, they had just kind of opened up to each other and said, let's move in that direction. Well, Tonto, that's an awfully extreme reaction to take. There are many, many girls in real life who make that decision. There are many girls who have a daughter, extremely young, and decide they're not ready to be a mother, and so move. And so I'm not comfortable, labeling all of them as not right in the head. I don't agree with that decision, but I think there is that's a decision a lot of people make. Yeah, exactly, Fisher. They were great together, and I really felt like that was going to be the ending. And it's one of the reasons that it's a head scratcher. I'm like, why didn't you just make that the ending? It would have been a very it would have been not just a one of the things I like is that the two kids are constantly butting heads, so it's not a happy ending in the sense that everybody is happy and playing around with it. It's not that everyone is perfectly fit, but it's that Japanese concept of wa, right? Where people don't all have to be happy constantly to be able to function effectively as a unit. So they could have been a very functional and effective family unit, even if the two kids were constantly butting heads, because that's just how they do that. So yeah, it's really weird, and it's why I'm glad I read the manga and I didn't just say, well, that's creepy, I'm not going to read it, because reading it really made me appreciate where the story was going, and even if I wouldn't have written it, it's not that I see why she did it, but I don't know. I'm glad I read it. I'll put it that way. Well, and that's the thing Spin to Win is she does want to. The thing is, it's not that she doesn't want to live her life. She wants to have a career, and as I mentioned, so there's a thing where they're talking about what people's jobs want to be, and she decides after a while that she wants to work in like a nursery with kids, and maybe in like an adoption agency, something along those lines, and help kids who are like her. And it becomes very clear that that's her thing. So living with Daikichi and even having his kids. That is not in her mind giving up that dream. She's not saying I want to be a live-at-home housewife. She's saying, I want to live with you and have my life and have my career. I think it's one of the reasons why Daikichi is so cool with the whole idea, or at least, isn't, um, you know, I think it's why Daikichi reacts the way he does, because I think there's a certain amount of him thinking that, well, maybe this is a thing that she's going to grow out of once she actually goes down that route of, college and the career and so forth and so on. In other words, it's not her deciding to retreat into a shell. It's her saying, I like this relationship, I like this home life, and I want this home life to continue, right? So that's another interesting little twist there. It's a great example of where you got to be careful of just reading a thing. And also, to be clear, when she says basically, I want to someday, have your child, and it did feel creepy to me. Although it isn't kind of done in that way in the manga, but I was just like, whoa. She's not saying, I want to be pregnant by you, for the next 20 years. She's basically saying, I love you so much that I would love for you to have a legitimate child in this relationship, right? I would give this to you, in a sense. It's kind of her showing her how far she would go for him. And again, his reaction is kind of like, that sure. But it's weird. It's definitely a weird story and a weird thing. Like I said, I just feel like I would have written it that direction, but I don't know. I'm not a mangaka. And certainly, it got an anime adaptation. It's not like people just screamed and yelled and ran away. And also, last thing about this is that in the in the notes at the back of volume 10, the author talks about how she wanted to make very clear throughout the story that they are not that the two do not see themselves as that Daikichi sees himself as a guardian of her, and she sees herself as being cared for by him. That is not that they haven't simply fallen into this idea of this parental relationship. So they're trying to she's trying to establish that. I don't think they do a really great job of that, but whatever. And that's the thing. Whoops, 1 second. Oh, wrong mouse. That's the thing, Spin to Win, is there's no pandering in this whatsoever. Like if there were pandering in this, then I would be throwing it across the room and shredding it. It's completely non-pandering, but then it also kind of makes it, and I think it's to your point, Spin, is that it then kind of makes it okay. So other people are like, oh well, then I can do that in my stories. So I don't know if that's cool. It's weird. Welcome, Marion. Welcome, Rockman. Good to see you all. Just finishing up talking about Bunny Drop. So yeah, I certainly can't not recommend it. Or it's one of those stories where I'm like, if you're interested in this, read it. I don't think you're gonna find it as weird as people say it is. You'll find it weird, but you're not gonna be like, oh, get away. Just kind of like, whatever. And again, I really, really, really deeply appreciated how well it showed what it's like to be a child. And not just in that fun running around, enjoying life way. It's not, it's about being a kid is hard. Being a kid is being an alien in this adult world and not knowing what the rules are and trying to follow them and trying not to piss off all these big people who make all these rules for you, right? No, I don't quite understand what you're asking, Fisher. I mean, I don't think this happened to the author, if that's what you're talking about. I don't think this was inspired by a true story that I'm aware of. But yeah, and only 10 volumes, so easy to get through. You know, that's a day to just churn through that. Thanks, JW. So let's move on a little bit. It's been a weird week. Really normal temperatures, and it got really hot over the past few days, like up in the lower 90s, which is usually like 20 degrees in Fahrenheit, and it's normally much cooler than that around here. And then this evening the rain came in and it started to cool down. So it's been, you know, my air conditioning system has been kind of struggling to keep up with all of these stories. It's or all of these temperatures. It's very odd. And also, this is the end. This is the second to last day of my media fast. So I've been consuming no media for the past ever since Sunday, other than that little bit of video gaming. Sorry, I started on Monday. So 5 days of just no media input, just kind of refresh and clear the expectations. But it's just been an odd week, and then things have been busy at work. You know, as that sometimes happens, unusually busy. Nothing terrible, just a lot of stuff happening. So, yeah, that's the way it is. But I'm looking forward to getting back to anime, and I got Nadia on my list. I gotta get to Nadia. All right, so we're gonna talk here in a minute about we're gonna do the great debate and discuss. And I keep forgetting to do the interstitials. Dang it. But I wanted to do a quick great debate, and we'll see what you guys think about this, but I just want to kind of throw out some thoughts around this one topic, around Hayao Miyazaki, and this doesn't have to be, you know, an argument in any way, shape, or form. I don't think it has to be, but I think it's something that comes up occasionally that's worth getting some thoughts out there. Take another swig of water, because I can tell. Do I like South Park? That's a complicated question. I'm going to answer that question. I appreciate South Park. I recognize how funny it is. I recognize its biting, sarcastic, but pointed humor. I appreciate how Trey and Matt really have a nose for people trying to play other people and those sorts of things. But I don't enjoy South Park. Like, I don't sit down and watch South Park. For all the biting commentary, half of it is very, very juvenile humor that I find lazy, for lack of a better term. Not all the time. Maybe half the time is a bit overstating it. But, you know, the flatulence and the poop jokes and all that kind of stuff is just, to me, gets in the way of when they're being brilliant. So there are certainly scenes in South Park that I think are brilliant and genius. But there's just too much other stuff to wade through. And not to be that guy, but I remember in college when the original South Park Christmas card video dropped. Like, I saw that there. I saw the, before the TV show was out, I saw that. And I've been, checking up on it, and that's just, where that is. Okay. So, welcome to the Great Debate, where today we are talking about the question of Hayao Miyazaki, the great legend of anime, and the question of, will we ever get another Hayao Miyazaki? And to be clear, I'm not asking, will there be somebody else who makes exactly the same kind of films as Hayao Miyazaki? Obviously not, right? That would be silly to ask. What I'm asking is, will we get another anime director who has a similar impact to Hayao Miyazaki, right? What Hayao Miyazaki did that folks like Satoshi Kon and Anno and others did not is that he elevated and escalated the reach of anime through his movies, i.e., more people watched anime, and a wider variety of people watched anime as a result of Hayao Miyazaki's movies. He moved anime closer to the mainstream, in other words. Certainly Anno found fans, and there are people who were not fans of anime and then saw Evangelion and, were blown away. But generally speaking, that's not the pattern. But Miyazaki had this strong impact, this very clear impact. There are lots and lots and lots of people who were not into anime and saw Kiki's Delivery Service and were like, I like that, I want to see more of that. So the question is, will we get another person like that? Somebody who is pushing the popularity of the medium with the general audience, right? With the mass audience. And this is important because it's true both in Japan and in America, right? Like, in Japan, people who didn't go to see anime movies went to see Hayao Miyazaki movies. And we see a similar thing over here in America. But there's this idea in Japan that even where in Japan there is this certain prejudice against anime as being kind of juvenile, and not that anime doesn't sometimes justify that view, but Miyazaki's able to kind of overcome that view even in a country that's kind of exposed to a lot of anime. Whereas in America, he became a lot of people's kind of first introduction in, right? So the question is that ever going to happen again? Can we get another person like Miyazaki? And it's complicated because partially it's a matter of time, right? It's a matter of time period. It's a matter of the fact that Miyazaki was working in the 80s and the 90s. He's been working since, but his core period, I would argue, is like late 80s to late 90s. We'll say... we'll say 84 to 91, 92 is when Spirited Away came out. So we'll say basically those 2 decades from Nausicaa to Spirited Away, right, are his prime time. And during that time, anime was in this weird place. It was certainly super popular in Japan, but it was churning into this medium that was either aimed at kids or aimed at this otaku demographic. And he broke that open and said, no, a 40-year-old housewife will want to watch my movies. And then in America, you had this thing where there were lots of different people out there. Lots of folks who had, some or no exposure to anime. And people were like, you've got to watch this thing called Castle in the Sky. And you've got to watch Spirited Away. And that got Adam Savage would be a good example of this in sort of the celebrity world, where he is not an anime fan, but oh my gosh, is he into Miyazaki, right? So the thing is, it's going to be hard to replicate that in the future, right? We're not going to be in those same situations where, in the 80s and 90s, anime really hadn't. Anime was starting to hit over here as a subculture. But the general person on the street now knows what anime is. They're familiar with that art style, right? But there's always room for a big hit, right? There's always room for a George Lucas or a James Cameron, or whoever, somebody who just makes the next blockbuster that everybody goes to see. And it becomes kind of this, this safe bet, really, which is what Miyazaki's become. People feel safe watching a Miyazaki movie. Not even so much Ghibli films. Over in Japan, Ghibli films not by Miyazaki get watched by, half or a third as many people. Because they don't know if it's going to be, like, quite the family film thing. And often it isn't, right? So understanding that, obviously, we can't predict the future, which means that there should be space for another Hayao Miyazaki. The question then would be, why not? Why couldn't there be another person who busts it open, who opens it up? For that to happen, they're going to have to make a certain kind of anime. And this is what's interesting. is that we're starting to see anime directors trying to do that. Mamoru Hosoda, clearly, his films are those safe family bets, more or less. And whether or not he's hitting that, and be turning into that, or whether he'll ever hit sort of Miyazaki levels of approbation and success, it's working in that sense that people are going to see those movies and he's making them, right? But that implies that it's not simply a matter of making a family film. We need something else to push anime into the mainstream, so to speak. And now, that's a word that gets thrown around a lot. I don't think anime is ever going to become mainstream in the sense that, like, everybody goes to see anime movies every weekend, right? Like, that's a fantasy. There are vanishingly few things in the world that reach that level of just mundanity, where just everybody consumes this thing. But we've certainly seen that. I mean, I've certainly seen that in my lifetime. Anime has gone from a thing that the average American did not know the definition of that word 20 years ago, and now they do, right? So it is expanding. That is an excellent question, Hemhoki. Could the next Miyazaki come out of China? That's a fascinating question. That is certainly possible, because China has resources. China could very quickly, there's a great segment on Top Gear, the British motoring show, car show, where they reviewed this Chinese car and compared it to BMWs and Mercedes and so forth, and it was certainly not up to that skill level. It was not up to par. It was an okay car, and they ended the segment by saying, "Now here's the thing: the best car to come out of China 5 years ago is this," and they pointed to this car that came out 5 years ago, and it was a complete mess. Like, it was a laughing stock. And China had gone from that to, not as good as the best in the world, but definitely close, definitely, edging into that ballpark. In 5 years. So China could absolutely marshal the resources, or I should say Chinese, creators could marshal the resources to create those big budget, things that appeal to audiences. The problem they're gonna happen there, and this is partly a cultural issue that we have. It's gonna be very hard for a Chinese director to consistently make something that appeals to a Western audience. But a Chinese director could very well be the Hayao Miyazaki to China. In other words, they could very well make Hayao Miyazaki, massively, not to make Hayao Miyazaki, but to make anime massively successful and to greatly expand its influence in China, in, say, India and Korea. And that's a bigger market than us. So that would be, an even bigger story than somebody who becomes a Hayao Miyazaki in the sense of what Hayao Miyazaki did. Right? We are not the entire world. So that is how that, that works. Jay in the chat asks, do you think anime has become more of a pop culture staple? It has absolutely become more of a pop culture staple. It is not a, big pop culture staple. It has definitely moved further in that direction than, say, 20 years ago. I mean, no question. Go into a Hot Topic. Go into a Target and, look down the aisle of how many DVDs have anime characters on them. It's not a lot, but you will see, more than zero. And that has definitely, changed. Video games. See how many anime-based or anime-inspired or anime-style video games are right out there on the shelves. Remember, you guys maybe not remember, back in the day, when a JRPG got brought over here to America, they would redo the box art so that it wouldn't have all these anime characters on the front, because that wouldn't sell, right? But that has definitely changed and shifted. So yeah, definitely that whole thing has changed, and I think Miyazaki is part of the reason for that, is that he created things that people could safely consume. You know, people could rely on and could understand in that sense. Yeah, you remember Jay? So yeah, absolutely, that has changed. So obviously, and to what we were saying before, we can't answer this question definitively because that would mean having a crystal ball. I can't predict the future. Neither can you, by the way. Much as we all wish we could. And that's how that goes, right? I think, though, it is possible. It's unlikely. It's going to be very hard because the future is not going to be what it was when Miyazaki was around. And the future is going to have very different forces at work and different requirements at work. And it may, again, be a matter of appealing to a very different market than it did before. A very different public, right? We will see. But who knows? All right, that will go. So Gene Harris said, do you think anime is bolder and more creative than American animation? No. Because there's examples of shocking American animation. It's just not on, it's not on weekday afternoons in television, right? So you're comparing Serial Experiments Lane to Dora the Explorer, or even, whatever is the American cartoons of the day, as opposed to, say, comparing Beyblade to Fritz the Cat or Wizards, right? Or The Secret of Nim. 12-Ounce Mouse, sure, yeah. There's been plenty of weird, creative, interesting animation. Serial Experiments Lane, again, aired in the middle of the night at a time when no one watched it. It was this weird experimental thing. It was not airing at weekday afternoons. Watership Down, totally. Plague Dogs. I think they are equally creative. There's just different forces at work. And there's plenty of Japanese cartoons. Again, look at Pokemon. There's nothing wrong with Pokemon, but that is not a massively creatively and intellectually challenging TV show, right? And also, American animation does not believe it is competing with Japanese animation. It does not believe that anime is really a threat. So they're not competing in the same way. They're not trying to beat anime at the intellectual game. They're just working on different standards, and that means that they're not trying to make that stuff. It's one of the problems we have, and it's a great question, by the way, Gene. It's one of the problems we have as fans is that we get into anime because we love a certain aspect of the medium. But that doesn't mean that the entire medium is about that aspect, right? So I love the intellectually challenging stuff, but that comes along once in a blue moon, right? That's not Tada Never Falls in Love. It's not Yu-Gi-Oh, right? And it's hard to do that. Well, and that's the other thing, Spin, is that the American animation industry they have grudgingly copied certain external elements of anime because anime kind of ate their lunch for a while, and they got scared, and so they're like, okay, well, we'll do a Teen Titans Go, and we'll try to make our eyes larger, things like that. But American animation really isn't doing what anime does in terms of long form storytelling that I've seen, in general. They're not copying the breadth of genre. They're not, and also more importantly, they're not thinking about character. In the sense that they're not giving you characters that you really, really deeply care about. That's something that anime always does extremely well, or usually does extremely well, right? Yeah, exactly. Teen Titans was heavily anime influenced artistically, right? Visually. But it's still superheroes. it is basically um, that. There are certainly, anime pacing, anime elements to it, but do big eyes in anime look strange for Western people? Which Western people? Some yes, some no. It's certainly a thing that a lot of Western people, a lot of non-anime fans look at the big eyes and kind of find odd. But that's funny, Bruno. So anime is never even finished. Yeah. And I'm not trying to rag on Teen Titans. It's not that they, that Teen Titans was a bad show. It's just that Teen Titans, to me, felt like, from what I saw of it, that it was, let's put an anime skin on a superhero show. And that's just not really what anime is, to me. Of course, that gets into the questions of what is anime really, which is, where do you go there? Let me switch back to the main. You're absolutely right, Spin. You are 100% right. The creators absolutely want to do long-form storytelling. Look at My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic. They absolutely do long-form storytelling in that show, mainly because when they created the show, they were like, this is what we're going to do, and no one cares about My Little Pony. So, this is part of this is part of what you get, and they're like, fine, whatever. And so it kind of got baked into the show. But if the suits had their way, Friendship is Magic would not have the the story through line it has, and even that show is pretty episodic, right? But no, yeah, absolutely, and most creators want to do long form storytelling. Look at Rick and Morty, there's long form storytelling right there. Still much more episodic, but I think Rick and Morty is about as far as you can push episodic storytelling. In a show that people care about, and when I say that, I mean in a show where going into it, people have expectations that the show will do well. When My Little Pony happened, folks were like, we hope this works, but it's this really, really long shot. And it turned out to be hugely successful and hugely, My Little Pony is aces. So when I say, nobody cares about it, I just mean that. Same thing with, but I think with Rick and Morty, folks were like, okay, people know who Dan Harmon is. This is going to air on Adult Swim. We have certain expectations around that, and you can see kind of just how much plot that they're able to work in to a season of Rick and Morty. That seems to be kind of the limit. Shows like Archer and so forth will work in little bits of plot here and there, but it's very much again, and I've seen very little Archer, but practically none. But from what I gather, the overarching plot is just a line here and there, one scene maybe, so forth and so on. But it's very much not this complex interwoven narrative that it is in anime. Steven Universe, true. Adventure Time, Gravity Falls, yeah. Gravity Falls feels to me like an exception, and I don't know the history of Gravity Falls, but that felt to me like an experiment where folks were like, let's try long-form storytelling in this one case. That's a good point, Carl. By the way, hey Carl, haven't seen you in a while. And in Avatar and Legend of Korra, and Avatar is an example where I think that was an experiment too, where Nickelodeon certainly wanted that to succeed, but that was kind of, okay, we'll flip the coin on this series and see if it goes somewhere. And they baked in long-form storytelling into that, and it worked. And I think that's one of those cases where Nickelodeon would have much rather Avatar have been a more episodically done show. And you can see that in season 1, where in season 1, the stories are... it feels like it could very well have been a much more episodically structured, show. And as things moved along, the powers that be could have kind of pushed them in a more episodic direction. But the meteoric success of Avatar, they were like, all right, you do what you do. We're not touching this, right? You're right. The 90s X-Men certainly did, but that was more because of the comics. right? I don't think '90s X-Men. I don't think were copying anime. They were doing that, but I think that is to your point, to our point, Hem, is that there's this stuff is done in America. There's interesting stuff being done in America. It just depends, right? American Animation Studio collaborates with the Japanese Animation Studio to create a film. The director of the film is America. Is American. Yeah, that would be Little Nemo in Slumberland. That's what that was, as I recall. And that tanked. That's insightful, Bruno. I agree. I think the long form TV series, Jessica Joneses and such. I think those are structurally much more like an anime series, plot wise, much more like an anime series than U.S. Animation is. But again, U.S. Animation isn't playing that game, right? U.S. Animation doesn't have to copy the anime formula. They have tried to various levels of I don't want to say success, but they have tried to various levels, and sometimes it's worked out for them, sometimes it hasn't. It's kind of like you see this in comics, where those come in waves where American comic artists will start to draw things that look more manga or more anime-like, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's the right mood or tone, sometimes it's wrong, right? But those long-form live-action stories, and I think that's less anime than it is The Sopranos and Babylon 5, and Miami Vice, where we had all those shows of that period that kind of proved that formula could work in live action. Yeah, exactly, Jay, and that's the thing, is that it's not like it's not like any of these things grew up in a vacuum and now everyone's copying it. Anime was copying other things. Anime is copying manga, right? Let's be honest there. Very little of that anime is doing is original. It is generally just copying the manga formula or whatever. Lion King wasn't inspired by anime. No. Disney said. Their lawyer said it wasn't inspired by Kimber the White Lion, so it certainly didn't happen at all. Interesting, Stanley. So if an American... so what could happen is... yeah, that's an interesting thing. What could happen is... So if James Cameron made a Gundam movie, a live-action Gundam movie, and then followed it up with more things like that, that would do it. If we got a big Hollywood director who just did anime stuff and did it, quality in a way that Americans could grasp, I think that would be kind of our next Miyazaki in that sense. Because that would be the bridge. You don't have to watch the cartoon, so to speak, but it opens up enough people that a lot of them then go on and they watch, First Gundam, or they watch Wing, or what have you. Right? Yeah. Alita is coming, supposedly, with her weird big eyes. Could next Miyazaki come from America? Absolutely. That's unlikely just because of how hard it is for an American to work effectively in a Japanese studio where everyone's speaking a different language, right? Like that language barrier and the cultural barrier is just a really big one to leap over when you are working 16 hours a day making, high art. Because you have anime creators making anime right now in Japan. There are Americans working in the anime industry. There's one that's done it. The guy who did Tekken King Crete, I think, was an American director, working at a Japanese anime studio. But I think those things just increase the difficulty very, very much. Oh, that's interesting, Carl, that Bryan Singer used the 90s series. And that's a good place to start. I mean, the 90s X-Men is absolutely there. Spin to win, you ask, is there ever originality in art? Yes. The problem is that a lot of people try to define originality as a thing that has never before existed in the universe, and that is not a useful definition of originality. And if you look up, reasonable definitions of reality, originality, it generally means a new twist, right? A variation that we haven't seen before. There is no originality in the sense of nobody's drawn this creature before, right? You can always find something that was done before that, all other things being equal. But yeah, people are changing things up all the time. I love tabletop role-playing games, and there are new tabletop games being made all the time, and a lot of them are new. Like that is a new way of interpreting dice. That is a new way of approaching this genre. But it's not, reinventing what it means to play a game on a table. I don't know, Hem. G. Savior didn't kill Gundam. G. Savior just came out and then life went on. I don't think that things like that, those things don't often really kill franchises. They're disappointments. Now, if we got a $300 million G. Savior that makes 10, then yeah, that's a problem. That wasn't really the story behind that. And I like G. Savior for what it was. Perhaps like is too strong a word. I enjoyed G. Savior. It was a Sci-Fi Channel original movie with Gundams in it. It was not great. It wasn't something I'm clamoring to watch again. That's fine. You're right, Bruno. Miyazaki will keep on making anime until he croaks at his animation stand. He retired in 1998, 20 years ago. He's 20 years retired. And with 5 films under his belt since then? 6 films, something like that. So yeah. But that said, I do think we've reached the point where Miyazaki's influence is, minimal if extant, right? Miyazaki's films are not having a big worldwide impact anymore. How do I feel when an anime like Ghost in the Shell or Akira get a live action remake? I don't feel anything. Okay. And then I go and watch them, and I make an opinion based on that. But it's, I don't really, I don't get upset when somebody else decides to make their version of a thing I have watched. Right? That's their job, or that's something they decided to do. It's like somebody's announcing, I'm doing fan fiction of Tenchi Muyo. How dare you? Okay, go and do that. That's fine. Don't have to watch it. Yeah, the CGI in G. Savior was definitely disappointing. Disappointing is a very kind word for the CGI in that. What do you think about reboots of older anime? I think reboots are generally a good thing, because one of the good things about anime fandom is that it has a very long Japanese anime fandom has a very long memory. So if they rebooted Yu Yu Hakusho, people are not going to forget that Yu Yu Hakusho was an anime in the 90s, right? When they reboot these things, folks are absolutely aware of the original. So if the new one doesn't work for them, they can go back to the original and try that one, and vice versa. If you tried the original, didn't really like it, you might try the reboot. So I think it's a very healthy thing within the anime medium. And over here in America, while that's not nearly as true, it's certainly likely that if somebody says, "Ooh, I love this new Cardcaptor anime," this is really cute, it's really fun. Generally speaking, somebody's going to say, there was a whole other series in the 90s, like this, this isn't the only Cardcaptor Sakura thing that ever existed. So there, I think it works out well. Did I like a Ghost in the Shell live action movie? Yeah, I thought the live action movie was I did a review of it. If you want the more detail, I thought it was precisely a live action Hollywood adaptation of Ghost in the Shell. Right? You're not going to expect that to be an incredibly deep, complex film. Big budget Hollywood, films are generally not deep and complicated. They are flashy, but it did respect the source material. It did tell a story that felt like if somebody had told me that Shiro had done this as a short story, 10 years ago, and this is what they decided to adapt in the movie, I would not be surprised, right? Like it felt like, it felt part of that universe, and the special effects and all of that did feel like a correct, an accurate representation of that universe. Yeah, absolutely. Live action is a reboot. I would say it is absolutely a reboot. I don't think it will be a long-lived reboot. I don't think we'll be seeing a lot more of that version of a Ghost in the Shell, unfortunately. Although that film did not do poorly overall. When it hit overseas, it made back its money and then some. So that film made a profit. They were just hoping for they would make double their money, and instead they made 20% more than they spent. So here's I'm hoping Ghost in the Shell did not kill people. And you're right, Bruno. Any version of Ghost in the Shell is a reboot. You're absolutely right. Standalone Complex is a reboot. The anime movies is a reboot. Absolutely. Spin, I'm with you. I never could get into Fullmetal Alchemist either. I watched the first episode, the first 2 episodes, I think, of Fullmetal Alchemist. And I was just, it just was not for me. I think it's angsty tween. It's not angsty tween. It is, I'm better than you tween. Ed's attitude just really got under my skin. And it's kind of like Evangelion, where a lot of people just hate Shinji as a protagonist. And I don't have that strong of a reaction, but I understand where they're coming from. Yeah, they will almost certainly do the Akira live action film, Gene. I think you're absolutely right. Just because they've invested this much money into it, and it seems right on paper, right? If you were to take somebody with a lot of money and show them Akira, show them the success of Akira, show them the DVD sales of that worldwide in the intervening several decades, you can totally see them saying, yes, let's make this thing. And also you can see somebody saying, in a non-cynical way, you can see somebody saying, check out this manga. Wouldn't it be amazing to see this on screen? People saying, yes, I want to bring this to people. Akira would be an amazingly fun film to work on from an artistic perspective. So I can totally see it exciting people, and them doing that. I don't know if people will actually, will it be successful? Whoever knows. Well, yeah, it's been, and when I say likable, I mean, there are certain attributes of personalities that just get under our skin, and it varies from person to person. Lane is not a particularly likable person. You feel bad for her, but she's not really likable, right? I would argue Tai, in the original Digimon Adventure series, is not particularly likable. But he's not annoying, right? Whereas Shinji, for example, a lot of people find annoying just because of his particular personality. And it depends one person to another. So I was probably using poor words there. Netflix will absolutely change how anime is made. Netflix will absolutely shift the anime medium in the sense that, as you say, Daniel, an anime studio can make an anime series for Netflix, and it can appeal to this very specific audience, I suspect. Netflix seems to be totally cool with making things that have a relatively limited genre appeal, so it's a great fit for anime. And there's a lot of direction to go with those stories. I think Netflix is a great place for anime. My concern with Netflix, though, is that it's a paywall. It is a fundamental paywall, and things disappear off Netflix. So there could very well be a time when Netflix decides to not fund that stuff anymore, and they just pull it off their site entirely, and it's just gone. And obviously there will be, torrents floating around, but that's my one, the thing itching in the back of my brain about Netflix. So we'll see. I have not seen Mary and the Witch's Flower yet. I'm not aware of any legitimate release yet. Perhaps it's out there. I just haven't been watching to see if it's been actually released. Yeah, but again, and that gets down to Samurai Champloo. It's that is the fact that they are not nice. See, I would argue that from my perspective, they were not nice people, but they were likable. I enjoyed spending time with those characters. They weren't nice, and that's different, I would say. How good are you all at remembering details and shows you finished years ago? It's a good question to the chat room. I'm curious to hear you guys' answers. I found I am surprised, and this is not bragging, I thought I would suck at this, but I'm surprisingly good. Like, I'll write a review and then go back and rewatch something and be like, yep, there's very little here that I didn't remember in terms of the large swaths of it. It's weird. I don't know why that would, why my brain just latches on to anime. And you're right, Gene, it depends a lot on the show. There's a lot of anime I've watched where I'm like, I have no idea what happened there. And Binchotan is one from years and years ago. So, what kind of anime do you want to see made? I.e., a show that can be about a historical time period, classic book, an adaptation of a classic film like A Clockwork Orange. Part of it is I want to see anime that is not an adaptation. I want to see anime that's a story I haven't seen before. Because if I want to see Clockwork Orange, I would read A Clockwork Orange or watch Clockwork Orange. I don't need to see an anime version of that. And I don't think an anime version of Clockwork Orange is going to do that justice, frankly. I would like to see anime and manga tackle, say, American science fiction stories. I'd love to see an anime, a 13-episode Doctor Who series in anime. Or, heck, Dune in anime. A true Starship Troopers anime. An accurate Starship Troopers anime. There's so much in science fiction. Ringworld would make a perfect anime series. It's all about weird aliens and all that kind of stuff. Star Wars anime. And there was the one made by that one animator who did that amazing 10-minute anime style Star Wars short. It's like, yes, that's exactly right. But yeah, I would love to see. I've always thought Ender's Game actually would have fit anime perfectly because it's about kids in space, right? It's Infinite Revias, right? It's half of sci-fi anime. So I'd like to see that, but again, I don't necessarily want an anime adaptation that just copies every plot point from the book. I want an anime adaptation that takes the basic premise, maybe essentially the setup and more or less the ending, but give me a different journey there. Give me new characters, give me twists on it. I'm totally up for that. What genre of anime would I like to see it make a comeback? Real Robot. That's easy. The OVA Starship Troopers was not accurate. There are no tentacle monsters in original Starship Troopers. Nope. Those aliens are completely wrong. And they don't get Earth culture right either, from what I remember. One of the themes of the book is imagining essentially a Spartan American society. An American society where the right to vote only goes to people who served in the military for some length of time. Right, where military service it's not required. You don't have to go into the military service, but it is kind of the backbone of what it means to be part of that, to be part of culture, and it does it in a way that remarkably doesn't make fun of it, but also doesn't make it, massively jingoistic. One of the problems with the Starship Troopers movie is that it kind of turned that into a cartoon, right? It turned that jingoistic aspect into this kind of in-your-face thing, whereas Heinlein was saying, no, let's imagine a functional society where this is true, where it's not massively abusive, where people aren't marching in the streets because of how crazy it is. Let's imagine that society and then look at what look at the effects of that. And it's one of the reasons that it's my second favorite science fiction book of all time, because of how smart and clever it is with all that. And as I recall, the OVA is just pretty boys in, again, accurate powered armor shooting at tentacle monsters, and that's kind of sad. So yeah, they certainly got the powered armor correct, as accurate as that. But yeah. Interesting, they did sort of Cliff Notes manga of Metal Gear Solid. That makes sense. Like, if you're going to do a manga of Metal Gear Solid, do kind of a here's the story version, so folks can kind of say, oh, okay, here's the thing, Perhaps I will never, I may never play this game in this series, but I can read the manga and kind of get the feel for it in a visual way. I think it's a great thing. It's one of the healthiest aspects of manga culture in Japan is how easy and cheap it is, relatively speaking, to commission a manga. So you get lots of manga about a lot of different things, and people commission these wonderful little manga one-offs that give you a lot of context for things. I think it's really smart. And you see lots of weird manga and anime adaptations of little novels and things, where it's just like, why this? Well, because why not, right? But yeah, I'd love to see that stuff. All right, we have dramatic reading. Let's do the dramatic reading. And I have a person for our dramatic reading. I have to do it right-handed. And mouse left-handed. This is the tough part. I'll have to practice the left-handed mouse. And I think, yeah. Let me try pulling it up over here. There it is. So I can at least read it while I'm going through. Oh, I need two people. Crow, no. Ronald, no. No. I think we're going to have to do him. Yep, okay. Exactly, Fisher. Okay. So let's see if we can make this work. This is going to be interesting. Dramatic reading is a fun one this week. Okay. Can I get down? Yeah. Hi, fellow otakus. If you read issue 6-4 of An America magazine, they interviewed voice actor Amy Howard, Nova Starblazers. She says that Disney is doing a live-action movie of Starblazers. Well, Disney is going to do a Sailor Moon live-action feature. And Warner Bros. Is thinking of doing a live-action Speed Racer movie. Do you think Disney and Warner Bros. Will screw up the translations from anime to the silver screen? Or are they making it all up? What do you, the anime fans, think of all this? In my humble opinion, they are going to suck. Speed Racer has been in production limbo since the 80s, and they are nowhere near a working script. Sailor Moon is being produced by Gina Davis because her daughter loved the series so much and will be casting her own daughter in one of the roles, now leaving it up to an actress. Come on, please, give me a break. This will suck. And now they want Star Blazers too? Ack. When will this end? Don't you think that's their reason why they were cartoons in the first place? 'Cause all of these series were too far-fetched to be believable as a live-action movie? It is more believable and endearing as the anime they are meant to be. Do not destroy them by making live-action movies. What will be next? Live-action Kekko Kamen? Oh no, wait! The Japanese have already done a live-action version of that series. Pulling hairs now. What? Fark. Sorry. It wasn't transitioning. Starting again. One more time. You're right, Benny. Live action Macross makes so much sense. Hey, live action something. Like, do Macross. Okay. One more time. Gotta click up here. Okay. This is a dramatic reading of an anime post from 20 years ago today. Hi, fellow otakus. If you read issue 6-4 of Animerica magazine, they interviewed voice actor Amy Howard, Nova Star Blazers. She says that Disney is doing a live-action movie of Star Blazers. Well, Disney is going to do a Sailor Moon live-action feature. And Warner Brothers is thinking of doing a live-action Speed Racer movie. Do you think Disney and Warner Brothers will screw up the translations from anime to the silver screen? Or they are making it all up? What do you, the anime fans, think of all this? You know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to try to do these transitions live. I'm going to do them this way. And just fix it in post. In my humble opinion, they are going to suck. Speed Racer has been in production limbo since the 80s, and they are nowhere near a working script / Sailor Moon is being produced by Gina Davis because her daughter loved the series so much and will be casting her own daughter in one of the roles, now leading it up to an actress. Come on, please. Give me a break. This will suck. And now they want Star Blazers too? Ack. When will this end? Don't you think that's her reason why they were cartoons in the first place? 'Cause all of these series were too far-fetched to be believable as a live-action movie. It is more believable and endearing as the anime they were meant to be. Do not destroy them by making live-action movies. What will be next? Live-action Kekko Kamen? Oh no, wait! the Japanese have already done a live-action version of that series. Ah! Pulling hairs now. Leave anime, and live action out of it, unless it was made for live action. Here are some anime-based live action movies that were made. See what they all have in common. Geyer 1 and 2. American company, both sucked. 8-Man, done by Japanese, but lost all creativeness, and did not follow original story too well. Wicked City, Chinese version, nowhere as good as the anime version. Doomed Megalopolis, talk about sour grapes. Crying Freeman, as hyped up as it was, followed original idea, but Dakasko, how the hell do you spell his name anyway? He's from my home state, and I don't even know how to spell his name. Disappointed by lack of character. Fist of the North Star. Do I really need to point out that this was plain bad? Dragon Ball Z? There was one made by the Japanese. Nevi saw it, but they had the actors dressed up as the characters. Imagine seeing an Oriental with a blonde stand-up wig? Yeah, nightmares. Gunhead. Nice, but did not follow original manga all that well. Now compare all of these movies. Do even one of them come across as blockbuster material? I think not. Yep, Gatekeeper Puppet. Tondo, you're absolutely right. Man. And as is so often the case in these things, it's not that, live action anime adaptations are awesome. We're not arguing that. It's just, oh my gosh. Chill, please. Oh man, Tonto. If somebody announced an American live action adaptation of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, there would just be an implosion. Funny story there, actually. Not about that. When Harmony Gold approached the I forget the name of the studio that did Macross. It's slipping my mind. But they approached them saying basically, Robotech is huge over here in America. We'd like to commission a sequel, not series, a sequel season. We want to commission another 50 episodes of Robotech, like our story, but animated by you. So just like so many, American cartoons made in Japan, we will do the storyboards and all that kind of stuff. We'll do the story treatment, but then we hand it all off to you to animate. We don't want it to make it look American. We want it to be anime. Just it's like you're adapting a manga. You're adapting, this particular story. And when they went to talk to the Macross people about it, they were the Macross studio was fine with doing that, and they actually started working on that and produced several episodes of Robotech Season 2. But when they sat down to do the initial sort of pitch meetings, the folks who did, the folks on the Japanese side said, understand, we have to do this in secret. They're like, why? Because if word got out that we were making a second season of Macross based on an American adaptation of it, there would be blood in the streets. Like, otaku would be showing up at our offices with, the large knives looking for our blood. Macross is a sacred cow, and, we have no problem with you adapting it and doing this American thing. And we have no problem, doing your version, as long as you pay us for it. But we cannot let anyone know that this is had any relation to Macross. It's one of the reasons why, by the way, that when Robotech was coming out over here in America, they kind of, they didn't advertise the connection to Macross very heavily, because they were in these negotiations for season 2, and they were like, apparently Japanese fans are crazy. So yeah, that was a real concern amongst those people. They actually got the director of Southern Cross contacted them and said, you kind of rescued Southern Cross from obscurity, and so if you'd like my help on any project you're working on, I'd be happy to help you out, kind of as a favor. Southern Cross was supposed to be kind of his masterwork, but it just kind of tanked in America. I'm sorry, it tanked in Japan because it started very slow, and when it came out, it was part of Robotech that really got more interest and attention to it. So, kind of funny how all those things work out and cycle around. Kind of weird. But yeah, that'd be funny. But yeah, there was a Crying Freeman, I think Japanese adaptation. The funny thing is, City Hunter, those were Jackie Chan movies. Jackie Chan did like 2 City Hunter movies. It's just not really City Hunter. Like, it's the same, same character names, but like he's not an assassin anymore. It was turned into a Jackie Chan movie, right? Not really very faithful to the original manga, but definitely considered classic Jackie Chan movies. I've seen, I think, City Hunter 1, and again, it was a Jackie Chan movie. I was like, oh yeah, wasn't this a manga? It's like, Can outrageous and controversial anime comedy be made? Good question, Stanley. I don't think so, because depends on your definition of outrageous. People talk about Pop the Epic as being, outrageous. Furry Curry is certainly an outrageous anime comedy. But Japanese comedy is not controversial. It's not political. They're just controversial political humor. That is a line that humor does not cross in Japan for whatever reason. Just nope. There's no connection there. So I don't think we'll see controversial anime comedies. It's just not. It's one of those weird cultural things. But yeah, I mean, outrageous humor, sure, in that kind of goofy, ridiculous, over the top sense. And I mean, you could argue that Agent Aiko was outrageous and controversial in the sense that it was kind of highlighting the absurdity of fan service and panty shots, and that it was definitely a commentary on fan service and panty shots in that sense. Especially once you watch it all the way through, you realize, oh yeah, this isn't just a joke. Like they're making a point with this, but it's a pretty mildly controversial statement to say that fan service is ridiculous. But yeah, it's a weird thing about Japanese comedy. I've actually seen some stuff about. Welcome back, Spin. I've seen some stuff, it's like some documentary stuff about Japanese comedy, and they say it's just one of those weird things that they just don't really tackle. Seriously. What if the anime was attacking American society and not Japan? Possible, but I don't know. There's not. Anime generally doesn't attack other cultures, so it doesn't seem like a big deal. Huh. There's a lot of anime I like this season. Different though. Yeah, what you're thinking of there, Fisher, is Saint Young Men, the story about Buddha and Jesus as college roommates, but it's not really controversial. It's a comedy, but like no one's, that is not seriously taking the piss out of Buddhism or Christianity. It's just a ridiculous, concept with ridiculous characters. Recommend me some stuff. Let me look at the. I mean, you can watch the spring 2018 video for details if you want all the stuff. Well, just one second while I pull up the Crunchyroll simulcasts, because High Dive, there wasn't much on High Dive besides Tana Never Falls in Love is cute and fun, but just a bit, probably not a big deal for me. Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. 1 second. Well, Full Metal Panic: Invisible Victory, but you kind of need to have seen the other 3 Full Metal Panic series. So that's kind of it's a big call. Kitaro. I have not watched more of Kitaro beyond episode 1, but that is a perfect adaptation of Kitaro. It's creepy, but it's also shonen. What I've seen of Golden Kamui has been a faithful adaptation of that manga, but an effective adaptation. It's not, we're going to copy panel by panel. It's I wouldn't say it's dark, but it's definitely more of a drama with some action elements, but action grounded in reality. Let's see here. Oddly, I really, really enjoyed Yotsuhiro Biori, which is just about a cafe. It's a very quiet show about people in a cafe, hanging out in a cafe, and it's not a slice of life story in the sense of it's cute anime characters hanging around. It's just people hanging out and talking, and it's not that kind of weird light comedy stuff of the that kind of slice of life concept. It feels like if you did a serious live action TV show set at a restaurant where you just want to make it about the little daily dramas of the restaurant, nothing life and death, but it's definitely pitched at adults, right? That's what that felt like. Scrolling back up there through everything else. What else appealed? But again, this really depends on your styles and interests. Fascinated by Lupin the Third, Part 5. Or is it Part 4? Part 5. Again, haven't watched more of episode beyond episode 1 because I've been on my media fast and other stuff. But that seems like a really solid, big action-adventure story in that sort of James Bond tone. Some friends of mine really liked Magical Girl Ore, and I enjoyed it too. So that one I might check out more of just because they seem really into it. And then I'll probably dig more into Isekai Izakaya, just because the whole D&D connection. That works for me. The thing though, Daniel, is Rurouni Kenshin made a fantastic live action adaptation. That adapted to live action perfectly. So I think the key there is that so on the one hand, obviously the viewer has to realize it's not going to be the same exact hairstyle, but as long as the hairstyle echoes the hairstyle of the manga in a way that fits real people, I think that's where you have to you have to find that middle ground, right? Case closed is expired. Yeah, I don't use any of the ANN guides or whatever. I do not have a very high. I have not had positive experiences with anime reviews on ANN. Their reviewers have not been particularly helpful for me, put it that way. What makes anime anime? There is no answer to that question. What makes me Caucasian? My my ancestors, I guess you could possibly trace them back to the Caucasus at some point, right? But it's and then this bit of that and that bit of this, and it's just there's no connection. When people ask me that question at conventions and they want a real answer, I say that anime is a stylistic approach to animation that combines a number of different sorry, brain fart. It combines a number of different elements, a number of different sort of visual tropes, if you will. So it's not anime means doing the following dozen things with hand-drawn animation. It has to do with art style, it has to do with pacing, it has to do with use of time, how sound effects are used. There's all these different things, you know, in there. So I certainly believe that, you know, anime cannot be defined as anime made by Japanese people, because that's racist, right? I've only seen bits and pieces of Ruby. So I don't know enough about it, but I think CGI is such a. I don't consider CGI, well, nah. In my heart of hearts, I don't consider an all CGI show to be anime, in the sense that I don't think we can map anime, the anime style, onto CGI in a more or less, I don't want to say objective way, right? But CGI is such a different approach to animation that what makes anime doesn't translate one-to-one to CGI. So we're seeing moves towards that in things like Ruby and the Crystal Girls one, and you know, so we're certainly moving in that direction in some ways. But I have a difficult time, you know, and colloquially I consider, what is that, the name of that? That's going to annoy me. But the Crystal Girls one, colloquially I call that anime, partly because that does match up that artistic style, you know, extremely well. But in general, it's just too difficult to make that translation. Thank you, Land of the Lustrous. That's what it is. And I love Land of the Lustrous. I'm not saying CGI is bad. I'm not saying, you know, Japanese people should stop using CGI. I'm not saying Japanese people should not do CGI series. It's just it's different. It is a very different thing, and it's one. And I think we're going to see more CGI shows in the future. But the studios have been very cautious about it because they realize that they need to figure out how to do that in a visually effective way, right? You don't just model up a character that looks like an anime character and just pose them. You know, we've been for the past decade or so to a point where CGI looks like anime. You know, look at Idolmaster, like the game, and it's like that is, you know, that is like a screenshot from an anime series. Boom. What's Shin Sekai Yori? Is that To the New World? I don't think I've seen that. Just haven't gotten to it yet. But I actually do a whole panel about the various aspects of that I think go to defining anime in terms of, you know, big eyes, small mouth. Although that's a broad thing. How characters are positioned in the frame, the use of still imagery, the use of realistic sound effects, all those things. From the New World, yeah. Haven't seen a frame of it. Yeah, and I think the newer Berserks is a great example of where they're trying it out, but they haven't found that connection. The new Fist of the North Star, Fist of the Blue Sky, I think is the name of the new series. It's getting closer, but they just haven't quite found that right formula, and it's going to take a while. And you know, anime evolved, right? Anime didn't look like Macross in 1963. You know, it takes a while for all of these things. A lot of the elements were there, but it takes time for all those artists to work out a visual style that is effective. Especially when it comes to like coloring, it's really hard in CGI when you're lighting things to make things visible to the viewer and easy to pick out for the viewer, compared to hand-drawn where you have these large swaths of color. So CGI is hard. Yeah, Kenshiro is a tough hurdle for Fist of the North Star. Kenshiro is a very particular kind of hero. And again, it gets back to that thing where a lot of people find Kenshiro's, you know, personality to be very annoying, and I just don't like watching that. I have not seen Berserk, so I do not I can't help you there, unfortunately. Do I think Evangelion and Dragon Ball Z are overrated? What is the most overrated anime? What anime do you think is underrated? I think the whole overrated underrated thing is ultimately too subjective to have reasonable arguments about. I think how overrated is Evangelion? Give it a number. I don't know. How overrated is Dragon Ball Z? I don't know. I don't see people walking around the streets pushing Dragon Ball Z discs in people's faces. I don't see people doing that to Evangelion, things along those lines. People love Evangelion. They love Dragon Ball Z. Awesome. They absolutely adore those series. I don't see there's anything wrong with that. But whatever. Evangelion is a flawed masterpiece, but definitely a masterpiece. Yeah, DBZ is absolutely a gateway drug. That's a perfect way of putting it. It's a weird gateway drug. I remain amazed that people get into anime through Dragon Ball Z, because it's like, okay, watch this, and then there's nothing else like Dragon Ball Z out there. It's weird. Exactly, Eva. It's good against asthma, some respiratory diseases. It reduces the effects of the plague, but it does not cure cancer. So it's very important. So yeah, I think it's fine. Most overrated, again, it depends on the person, right? I don't think I don't overrate Evangelion because I'm not a massive fan of it. Same thing with DBZ. You're right, and you're right, Spin. That is one of the drawbacks to Eva, is that it kind of assumes that you know what it's talking about. It assumes you see Rey and you're like, oh, got it. It assumes you see. It assumes that you understand that it is an inversion of super robot tropes. And a lot of a lot of Eva fans don't get that, and that's fine. You don't have to get that, but it's kind of, there are a lot of things that are kind of core to Evangelion that they're riffing off of. That makes it hard as a gateway anime series. So yeah, that's the complication there. But then you have people who get into anime through Eva. I knew some guy at a job who somebody recommended Eva to him, and he went home and watched it that weekend, and that went to there. I don't know. I mean, Paranoid Agent, again, it's one of those things where I think the people who watch Paranoid Agent absolutely adore that series and love it, and will talk your ear off about it, but it's certainly not talked about massively. But I don't know how much people talk about Paranoid Agent one way or the other. There's a lot of shows that I assume folks are talking about that they're not, and vice versa. I did not realize how big Attack on Titan was in America for a while. Like, obviously I knew it was successful, but apparently, like, everyone watched Attack on Titan. But certainly Paranoid Agent, I mean, it's hard to argue that Paranoid Agent is massively well known, sadly. Although Paranoid Agent's one of those, it's like Boogie Pop Phantom. It's kind of like Lane, where there are a lot of fans who've never heard of those shows. And they probably will always remain obscure. They're weird. Paranoid Agent is weird. Gotchaman Crowds is weird. A lot of these shows are never going to break into the mainstream. Just why, like we were talking about before, I don't think anime is ever going to break into the mainstream in the sense of big popcorn entertainment. It's just not, it's not, doesn't have that mainstream appeal for whatever reason. It's not a Michael Bay movie. Yeah, it's funny. I basically watched Satoshi Kon in order because I came across Paranoid Agent not long after it came out, and I lucked in, and this was not my experience with most other anime directors, but I just happened to be into it, and I was like, oh, he's made this film, let's watch this. And so I was very lucky that way. That just kind of moves forward. How could an anime show become mainstream? Well, mainstream where? In anime or Japan? That's a tough nut to crack in Japan, although it tends to be, make a fighting show. Make a show that kids grow up with. Make a sitcom. Make a sitcom for kids. Sitcom for kids. There's the thing. Doraemon, Crayon Shin-chan. To an American audience, if I knew I'd make it. You have the animation hurdle. That is a fundamental problem. So I don't think you're gonna go there. I am not familiar with Perfect Stranger. Um, I believe Perfect Stranger was a sitcom of the '90s. With like a Russian comedian in it. I think that's the only Perfect Stranger I'm familiar with. But yeah, I don't know that anime can break into the mainstream. You're making a different point. How could it appeal more to American audiences? So that is a good question. I think there are things it needs to not do. We talked about this the other day, where it needs to generally avoid the underage fan service. It needs to avoid a lot of specific Japanese culture. Girls in Sailor Scout uniforms as a common thing in the show in general. See you, Bruno. Perfect Insider. Again, I do not know Perfect Insider. I'm not familiar with that thing. Yeah, and it's a great point, Spin. Actually, is that a lot of the overrated, underrated ends up getting worked out over time, where something is massively popular for 2 years, and then no one talks about it anymore because it just hit the zeitgeist. Titanic, the James Cameron movie, is a great example of that, where people went back to see that movie like 5 or 10 times in theaters while it was running. Now, I'm not saying that is a bad film, but what I am saying is, why that level of success? Who knows, right? I think Star Wars is a great example, where I love Star Wars. I get why people enjoy Star Wars, but why did that become the thing that sells billions of dollars a year? It's any number of things, but those things tend to work out over time, and we can now see one of the reasons why Star Wars works over time, because of the various elements of it. Although even there, it's still weird. George Lucas was asked about that once too, and he said, you cannot predict success. He said, I did not think Star Wars would be successful. I hoped it would be, but I figured it would maybe make back its money, and I'd make a little like indie science fiction film every couple of years, maybe. But he said, I couldn't predict it. No one else predicted it, but it just is. So that is one of those things. That happens. I think Dragon Ball Z, again, it hit at just the right time. And Dragon Ball Z had the advantage that it was not only was it unique, it came along in America at a time when American cartoons didn't look anything like that. They weren't structured like that. They weren't visually of that style, not just anime, but also that very Dragon Ball Z style. They weren't violent in that way. There was violence, but it's very different. It's Dragon Ball Z was just lightning in a bottle in terms of being remarkable, being what Seth Godin calls a purple cow. If you're driving along a road and you see a field of cows and one of those cows is purple, you will notice it. And that is kind of the marketing ideal. People want to be a purple cow, where it's not that you're cheating people, you're just different. And that's what Dragon Ball Z was. It was ridiculous. Yeah, exactly, Spin. The characters keep increasing in power. How dare they in this shonen series? That's crazy. They keep on adding new powers and getting more powerful than each other. Yeah, that's a thing that happens. That is like saying, gosh, in this Western, this guy can shoot somebody from 50 yards and hits him. That's really hard to do. That's unrealistic. Watch a Western, maybe? Weird. There's this fantasy world, and they have magic. And they don't explain scientifically why magic works. How dare they? Are animes with hour-long episodes impossible to make due to budget, amount of animators, restricted time? Yes. It actually was done once. Figure 17 was the anime series with 45-minute episodes that we had a 1 hour time slot. And the problem is you cannot work an anime studio that hard. And it is very hard to ask an anime studio to take on that amount of work, even if they have the capacity, because they need to be working on multiple projects at once in case something falls apart. So it's you're committing a lot of people, you're putting a lot of eggs in one basket. And so with Figure 17, they actually did one episode a month. So hour-long episode once a month. And that worked. The show did fine, but it was not a smash success. And the idea was that didn't seem to be a really effective way of doing things. But yeah, I think it's mostly animators. And also they already have OVAs, right? Like why would you do that when if you really want to do an hour-long episode, you just do an OVA. I would argue Legend of the Galactic Heroes was exactly that. Just hour-long episodes released that way. Yeah, but KyoAni is different. KyoAni is KyoAni. Ghibli can do it because Ghibli makes bank, and KyoAni can do it because KyoAni makes bank. I love anime with weird art styles. I am often attracted more to and am more excited by anime that look weird. I am an animation fan first, otaku second. Sorry, people probably unsubscribe, but it's just the way I am. So the more weird you are, the more interesting I am. As long as that weirdness is purposeful, right? Your weird lines, don't give me that. But be weird. I found Mind Game fascinating. California Crisis, fascinating art style, really interesting and different. Have some genres of anime been watered down? I don't think so across the board. Redline? Yeah, Redline, absolutely. That's a really cool art style. Angel's Egg. Would an anime released on HBO have a higher possibility of being successful? Absolutely. I think that would be a great place for anime, actually. I'm surprised HBO hasn't yet. It feels like that would just fit, into not only their approach to art, but I mean, Westworld belongs right next to Ghost in the Shell, especially the first Oshii movie, right? Like those are siblings. So there we go. Lost Bruno. Oh well. I have not seen Tatami Galaxy. I want to, but it's there on the list. Yeah, absolutely. An hour-long anime on HBO would be awesome. It would just be very expensive, and they'd have to spend a year making it. It's a lot of time and effort. They're probably like a production IG show or something like that, where you just have this massive thing. The other problem too is if you're doing an hour-long episode, the quality has to be pretty high, and it's just hard to muster that kind of a budget for that kind of a show. Somebody else claiming the anime industry is broken. Well, that's the one for this year. Let's see here. Yeah, Monster would be great for HBO. Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't read or seen it, but I've read a lot of Kurosawa. 20th Century Boys. Actually, 20th Century Boys would be perfect for HBO. Yeah. I'm sorry, not Kurosawa. Urasawa. Naoki Urasawa. Knife across and up. Yeah. Any manga I'd like to see become an anime? Plenty. The Stellar Six of Genpacho. Let's see here. Pluto. Although that'd be hard to get right. Let's see here. I'd love to see Blam get a full anime adaptation. Actually, no. There was one on Netflix. Never mind. Let's see here. 20th Century Boys is kind of up there. Let me think what else. Um, oh yeah, Mobile Suit Gundam École du Ciel, which is Shoujo Gundam. Yeah, not quite shoujo. It's shonen, but it's much closer to shoujo than shonen. That's a really interesting manga, which I think stalled out, sadly. There's another one tickling the back of my brain, and I'm looking at it now. I mean, there are some where I'm like, this would be fun, but it's not like I have to see it. Let's see. It was recent too. Yeah. Doesn't jump to mind. Oh, I really want to see the end of Bunny Drop. The manga adapted into anime. That'd be perfect. How much would it cost for an HBO anime to be made? Oh, let's see here. 20 million? Probably. I mean, if it's a season. How many episodes in a series is too many for you? Like 100 isn't too much. I would say well over 100. You know, if it's 100 and going, if it's not like, well, we did 2 50-episode seasons and there'll probably be a third, I can handle that. I've watched pretty much all of Gundam, and that's 1,000 episodes there. It's just different stuff. Yeah, exactly. But End of Bunny Drop would be great. Good for the anime industry, I think, to get the end of Bunny Drop as an anime. Yeah, Usagi Yojimbo. That'd be fun. Let's see here. My opinion on Do You Remember Love? It's kind of complicated because Do You Remember Love is its own thing. It is its own story. And I think it did an interesting job. It did an effective job of readapting or reworking that story into movie length. I thought, spoilers, no, non-spoilers, I thought Roy Foker's plotline, I much preferred how that worked its way out in the anime series. But I love the sequences of them at the end going through the ruins at the end. I thought that was better paced and not better paced, but also more emotional in the movie. And the movie is just, of course, much more beautiful. Like the animation, the art is, they have more time to really focus on it. So it's that really, it's 6 and 1/2 dozen the other, where I think they as a big budget movie adaptation, well done. But it certainly doesn't replace the anime series, and it's not like that's the ideal version of the TV series. Yeah, no, I could not do 900 episodes of anime. Unless I just loved it. And that's the other thing too. So to be clear, like if I sat down to the first episode of Naruto and been like, oh my gosh, I have to see where this goes, I would watch all 100 episodes of Naruto. But I have not seen a series that long that has done that for me. I'm willing to do it, but shonen generally just doesn't connect with me, and particularly those shonen structures. But I have a friend who's making her way through Naruto. She's skipping all of the filler. And that's a smart way of doing it. All right, we've been going for 2 hours. I'm gonna have to stop here. I was gonna do Naruto rolls for Otaku no Cooking, but I think we're gonna hold off on that for next week. Just because I'm running low on stamina here. But this has been great. Thank you all very much. I was as the stream was starting, it was taking a while for folks to come in, and I was worried that folks would this would be one of these really light evenings when there's just nobody around, and I just kind of did my episodes, and then I ended in 45 minutes. But this has been a fantastic discussion. So thank you all very much for being here. I'll be back next week. Just so you know, in I think it's 3 weeks, there is a convention in my area put on by the Washington, D.C. Science Fiction Museum. and that's a hint to where I live. And I'll be driving out to that. I might be able to still do the live show, but I might not, and I'll let you know ahead of time. But like, so in 3 weeks, I might have to bow out of the Friday night live stream. But otherwise, you know, I might. So I have a panel I'm doing on Friday, but it ends at 4 p.m. So we'll see. But other things may be coming up, and also I am planning on doing probably a 1 week break from the stream at some point, just to have a free Friday evening to get some other stuff done. I do not stand on an anti-fatigue mat, but this is a carpeted floor, so that helps tremendously, and so I don't feel, you know, I don't feel bad in that way. But if I'm doing this more often, unfortunately my other streams, I'm sitting most of the time. You know, for drawing, I'm sitting, so I don't really need an anti-fatigue mat. But especially if this expands, then maybe. That's a good idea, Tonto. Thanks for recommending it. So, yep, thanks all very much. We will see you all next week. Have a good one. Happy anime.